So welcome to this new series of videos, which I'm calling Rhythm Reading Bootcamp Season 1. What we're going to do is we're going to learn to sight read rhythms in standard notation, because most bass players, including myself, start out using tab. And what tab does, although it's a very good way of getting you immediately acquainted with the instrument, with some music and some bass lines, the problem with tab is it contains little or usually no rhythmic information at all. And that means that we grow up as bass players being able to play but not really have a concrete understanding of rhythm or an awareness of what all the rhythmic possibilities are, which means that a lot of the time when students come to me for lessons and they want to read, we have to do a lot of work on rhythm, and rhythm tends to be the most complex aspect of reading, because if you think about it, most of the bass lines that you play in most mainstream music involve only a handful of pitches, but there's an almost limitless, infinite supply of rhythms that we need to get our eyes and our ears and our fingers around. So that's what this series is going to cover. There's an accompanying book. Of course there's an accompanying book. Of course he's trying to sell you stuff. Anyway, hit the link below, go to the Free Bass Transcriptions web store, and you can pick up a copy of Rhythm Reading Bootcamp Vol.1, which contains all the information in this series of videos, plus a lot more in terms of detailed explanations of all the concepts that we're going to cover, and lots of notated exercises to put you through your paces. We're going to start out very simple with things like this, and by the end of the book, you're going to be reading things like this. We're going to start off by just covering some top tips for getting the most out of your rhythm reading time, and these are strategies that my students use all the time, and they get great results from relatively little investment of practice time. First and most important thing, make it smaller. If something is hard to read or hard to do, hard to practice, you need to break it down into a small enough chunk that it becomes easy. So when you're looking at a bar of music, let's just have a look at this, that can be quite daunting if you're not used to those notational symbols or you're working on this stuff for the first time. It's really helpful to go ahead and annotate the bar, mark out where each beat is placed. There's nothing wrong with scribbling on music. A lot of my students, and I used to be like this, a lot of people are afraid to get out a pencil and write on a book of music. But much better to scribble on a book and get the thing right than be afraid of writing on it and get it wrong, I think, anyway. You can go through and very clearly see where every single note in the bar falls relative to the beats. Eventually, you'll be able to just look at a piece of music and understand where all the things fit in. Sight reading is just pattern recognition. It just so happens that some of the patterns are new, unfamiliar, or slightly complicated at first. But over time, with persistence, they'll become part of your everyday vocabulary. So the second tip is don't start with the bass, particularly if you're new to rhythm reading or you're working with something that's quite complicated. It's worth spending a little bit of time clapping or vocalizing the rhythms. If you can't clap a rhythm, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to play it with any sort of accuracy or consistency on an instrument. So don't skip that step. It's tempting to think that you're good enough to do that, but I'd really spend a lot of time clapping, vocalizing rhythms before you get onto the instrument. It will save you time in the long run, although it might not feel like it. If we take that rhythm that we just looked at, put it up on the screen again, I've got two options really for practicing this before I get to the bass. The first is to count 1, 2, 3, 4 out loud and clap those rhythms. Let's try that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pretty straightforward. The other thing that I can do is count out the pulse either with my hands or with my feet and vocalize the rhythm over the top of it. Now, this sounds really stupid when you're doing it, particularly if there's someone else within earshot. They'll think you've gone mad, but it's really hard to sustain a clap. I can't generate a 4-beat clap, no matter how hard I try. With the voice, you can get the really concrete idea of how long a note lasts. So let's try that. Same idea. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ba da ba ba da 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 da. I'm aware of how stupid I sound, but my rhythms were accurate. So there we go. Third tip, practice everything more slowly, in smaller chunks, and more often than you think you need to. So just start out with one bar of music and repeat that thing until it's really, really comfortable. Again, I've said before, I'll probably say it again in this series, sight reading is just pattern recognition. You just need to get really familiar with those patterns. And the best way to do that is to take small chunks and repeat them until you're kind of sick of them. You feel like you can't get that rhythm wrong. So, if it's a complicated thing, begin with just 2 beats worth of music, but repeat it until it sort of gets into your bones. Then you can extend it to 1 bar, 2 bars. Before long, you'll be doing 4 to 8 bars without stopping, and it'll feel easy. But that's only because you've been through the smaller stages and repeated them until they were in your comfort zone. Much better to do that than try and bulldoze your way through a whole page of music and then get to the end and go, oh, I made 25 mistakes. Final tip, tip number 4. Once you're comfortable with the way things lay out in the exercise, start working with a metronome, because it's important to try and put this stuff on the grid. Most of the music that you will have heard, we've all been hearing for the past 30 years, has been sort of compressed and massaged and pushed into this very even, some would say very sterile, 16th note grid, right? Everything is perfectly in time, everything is quantized within an inch of its life. So you need to get really good at playing in time all the time. Now, when you're learning something new for the first time, it's very difficult to do it in strict time straight away, so don't worry about that. But when you feel like you're getting the hang of things, time to dust off that metronome and get going. So start out slowly, 50 BPM, 60 BPM. Read the examples and then gradually increase the speed. You might find that if you get too fast, you might need to take a step back again and clap or vocalize those rhythms until they're completely comfortable and they're completely locked in with the music. Bonus tip, record your practice. Now, this is something that a lot of people, including myself, sort of make a concerted effort to avoid doing because it's quite uncomfortable, but it's the most informative tool that you have available to you. It doesn't have to be an elaborate setup, just use the voice memo function on your phone. It's very difficult for you to be completely objective about how you really sound when you're in the act of playing, because too much of your brain's bandwidth is taken up with looking at the music, counting, and wiggling your fingers. You can't make an accurate critical assessment of whether you're completely in time, you're rushing, or you're dragging. So it's very useful to sort of have a second set of ears in the form of a phone or other recording device to show you when you're completely locked in and you've got the hang of the rhythm, or when you might need a little bit more practice. So those are my top rhythm reading tips. We're going to head right into episode 2 and deal with some fundamentals of rhythmic notation. I'll see you there.